Tomb of
Patrick
Dracula.
Logan.
Oh, I love Tomb of Dracula. Man, good pick, Henry.
Yeah,
I'm going to
good
talk
comic.
about it in a little bit.
Good.
So listen up, Scott. Scott's spotlight is on you, bud.
All right, so I'm going to talk about three films. They're all a bit different from the ones we've been talking about because they don't really treat vampires as evil.
Right.
And so this is going to be a little different. So this first I'm going to talk about in chronological order. This one is called Sundown, the Vampire in Retreat. And it is a very very much a hodgepodge of genres. It is not only is it a vampire film, it's a contemporary western, it is a comedy, it is a romantic comedy, and those elements are actually quite disparate. Um, and it's a film about adultery and adults dealing with adultery and trying to recover from adultery. Um, so
Trauma.
it's actually so that there are only four characters in this film who are not vampires, and that is the Harrison family. So David Harrison and his friend Shane Dennis. Well, they weren't really well. They were kind of friends. They were in college. They were engineering students. Um, Shane was kind of more of a partier, and he slept with a woman that David eventually married. Her name is Sarah, and Sarah also had an affair with Shane after they were married one time, and
So it's
she
like a
thinks
small town soap opera. Sounds like
yeah,
like
so
Twin Peaks or something.
so she thinks she's not sure if her younger daughter whether her younger daughter is David's or Shane's. So this is kind
Definitely
of
a
the
soap
back.
opera.
So this is kind of the whole backdrop for this
Okay.
film, and Shane uh is now in this town called Purgatory. I want to say it's called Redemption, which is a theme in the film, but it's actually called Purgatory. It's this old
Yeah.
copper mining town.
Cool as
Where
hell, really.
yeah, so it's the two of them. It was mainly David developed this project to make artificial blood, and Shane has deliberately put an incorrect valve because he wants David and his family to come back so he can have another chance with Sarah because he knows that he's going to bring Sarah along with her. I mean, even one of the kid, the first people they meet when they get to the town is this old couple, Anna and Otto, who have outlived their children, and so that they take a real grandparently attitude toward the
I
kids
get you.
who are named Gwendolyn and Juliet, and Anna says, "Your parents must be very romantic," and Juliet, who is the younger of the two little girls, says, "My parents are very horny." Which is not what you expect a little kid to say, but that is what they say.
Oh my
And so this is kind of the backdrop. So and by the way, Shane has been turned into this everyone in the town is a vampire. Shane has been turned because he panicked. So now he's a vampire as well. And so this kind of sets off there are some young people near the town, and there are these three old brothers who run a gas station, and one
They're
of them,
vampires.
they, like I said, everybody except the Harrison family in this film are vampires.
Okay. But they're
Except
working
for
on getting them over.
these few teenagers at the beginning. One of them was played by Dana Ashbrook of Twin Peaks fame.
Awesome. Bobby.
Yes, and so there's one guy. He puts up an attitude, and Mort, who's played by Emmett Walsh, whacks off his head. So he gets disciplined by Ethan Jefferson, who is the person in the town who handles discipline. He's also the only one who's allowed to turn people into vampires. He dresses like a Puritan. He is very old fashioned, kind of, and they turn people. And see, the reason they can live in this town is because they put this SPF 200 sunblock on, so that allows them to walk around during the day, even though they do keep covered up for the most part. And so that's kind of some of the humor in this film. Like, there's one vampire who's Jamaican. He's the sheriff. His name is Quentin Canada. And unfortunately, they left his theme off the soundtrack, which is the main theme of the film, played reggae style.
He's got the soundtrack to this one too, man.
Yes.
Well, I got a quick question about the vampires wearing SPF 200 sunblock. Do they have to choose between burning to death or getting skin cancer? Like, oh my God. It's insane.
Well,
Like, they also have
that's
pale
never
vampires
addressed. They
get
just
cancer?
smear it all over themselves and allows them to walk around in daylight.
Yeah.
And Mort wears this gigantic sombrero when he has to go out in it, because they're like sitting on this like shaded porch swing, waiting for people to show up in case they want to buy gas.
Well, let me ask you this, Scott. Let me ask you this. What is the central conflict between the human characters? Do they try to get out of the? See, I've seen it twice, but I still don't remember all of it. They try to get out of the town once they realize they're all vampires, or
well, initially they're all there because they need to fix this blood plant, and so that a lot for much of the film they don't know, and
the Harrisons don't know.
yeah, the Harrisons don't know, and in fact at one point they do try to leave, and they just think the people are crazy, because strange things that are happening here. And of course the romantic comedy element, Bruce Campbell plays Robert Van Helsing, who is a descendant of the Van Helsings, and he goes to the diner, and
they had a lot of kids, that family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Peter Cushing was getting busy, man.
Yeah. He falls for Sandy White, who's one of the few young vampires, but he doesn't realize she's a vampire, of course. They're trying to keep up appearances with this nasty looking diner food. It looks like the French fries are moldy, but like they can't really eat this stuff.
Hey, question. It's a spoiler question, but what about Latos? Isn't he the villain? Isn't that his name, Latos? Isn't this a movie with David Carradine? Or am I making
David Carradine is in it. I'm going to get to him because he does take a while before he's introduced.
Okay, good. Because I was like, I'm pretty sure he's the main antagonist. But go ahead.
Actually, he's not. But I will get to that.
Okay.
So Robert and Sandy are like instantly attracted to one another, and they decide to go on a picnic, and when he discovers reflected, he's not very bright. Because it's a Bruce Campbell comic character, and he sees that she in the hubcap that she has no reflection, and he pulls out his hammer and stake, and she's like, "No, don't kill me. I'll take you to because he's looking for Margulac, who is the David Carradine character. So he's like, "I'll take you to Margulac. Just don't kill me." So he puts her in these handcuffs, which they also establish in the film, because the Harrisons see the whole arrest of Mort and him being taken into the police station and stuff, and like, why is this guy not in handcuffs? He's just killed a guy, and like, oh, the handcuffs aren't going to do any good with this guy. Like, but he puts Sandy in handcuffs, and of course, she's very obedient. She's not going to hurt this guy, and she's not going to break the handcuffs because she wants. Because he knows he can stake her, and she's in love with him too, because they've clearly fallen in love together. It's very old. It's very old fashioned 1950s. They're playing Earth Angel in the diner when she's being introduced.
Right, don't stake me, baby.
Yeah, it's like very 1950s style, innocent kind of romance, and so they actually. They fall in through the skylight as the Harrisons are about to leave because David has fixed the machine.
David the character. Okay.
David the character. They meet Margulac, who's the David Carradine character, because the girls find a secret passage, because the house they're staying in was the servant quarters for the mansion where Margulac lives, and the younger girl has all these vampire posters all over her bedroom at the beginning of the film. It's like, I saw this guy come out of the coffin. He's a vampire. It's like
vampire culture.
But they leave, and like Margulac, Sandy keeps trying to tell him that everything is different now, and it's because they've got this artificial blood that they're developing, and they want to import this because they actually want to live in harmony with humans, and they figure if they're making this artificial blood that can help people who are injured, that will eventually bring about harmony between vampires and humans. And
that's pretty ambitious.
And Margulac really doesn't the only person who's allowed to turn people is Ethan Jefferson, the guy who disciplined Mort. But he allows Sandy to turn Robert into a vampire because he's just going to be if he doesn't. So she like eagerly bites into his, and there's a hilarious scene where he's got a cross around his neck and starts burning his chest. He screams, he pulls it off, and she's almost like this demure 1950s housewife reading the newspaper while this is happening, because he just wait, and he pulls out the mirror, and like he's like horrified that he's become a vampire.
He can't see himself.
He ends up allied with the good vampires, because Ethan Jefferson, who's been turning these people, it's almost like toxic masculinity, because like, we are vampires, we prey on these, and he's like and Marjolac compares, so do tapeworms and ticks and things like that. Vampires aren't special. We're better than that. We don't have to be like this anymore.
That's pretty
and
cool,
it's because they have this artificial blood. And he gives this whole inspiring speech about how he's rescued all these vampires who were very self-loathing. Like, one of them had preyed on a 10-year-old boy, and he was really upset about that. And then, like, these vampires had all realized that they didn't like their lives, and as much as they craved blood, he gives this very passion speech. This is not how you want to live anymore. But it ends up turning into this big conflict, and because Shane is involved here, the Harrisons end up getting stuck back in the town, and Shane, who's already made an attempt on his life. I think we actually see his junk for a split second, because he actually flies into the room as a bat and transforms and tries to rape
he's
Sarah.
a vampire too now.
Yeah, so yeah, he got turned. He got turned because he panicked. The Harrisons didn't panic, so they're allowed to leave.
Okay.
Wow.
There ends up this big war, and Shane has developed these wooden bullets that shatter on impact that allow the vampires to have these big Western shootouts. So it's this wild thing. The first person he shoots is Quentin Canada, which is kind of sad because he is a very fun character. And there are some Western stars in it, like Buck Flower, who ends up siding with the bad guys.
He's in like every John Carpenter movie.
Yeah, he actually reminds me of this guy I knew back in Indianapolis who's very conservative, religious, right? But anyway, he reminded me of that guy. I won't say his name, but anyway, so it ends up with this big conflict, and the Harrisons eventually come up with this plan. Actually, the good vampires help them, because they and Sandy, who really likes how much Harrison is in love with his wife, she actually gives him cover. She helps him try to rescue his wife from Shane, and he does end up destroying Shane. And then a lot of them get picked off. Anna and Otto get killed in this battle, but they actually wanted to die because they missed their children. So there's this big conflict, and it ends with this. We find out that Marjolac is actually Dracula, and Jefferson, and right. There's no way that Jefferson's gonna beat him. There's a duel between them, and Marjolac wins the duel. It's like, you can never defeat me, Jefferson. And the Harrisons pull out this gigantic cross that they built out of the furniture, and only the bad vampires get disintegrated. The others all are redeemed, and it ends with a happy ending. And
is Marjolac redeemed?
Yes.
He's
the good guy. Marjolac is the good guy.
So basically, Dracula got tired of the old ways and wanted to try to,
It's all about redemption. It's very comedically played. It ends with a big joke because David Carradine's all serious. He's like, I hope that our efforts will not be in vain, and Robert starts laughing. He's like, in vain, because we're vampires. And they just all start laughing. And even Sandy is kind of groaning at it because she loves him, but she's like, oh, it's not that funny, but I'm going to laugh to humor him. It's really cute. So
okay,
it's,
so
it's a,
what's your final verdict so you can move to your next incredible film?
I just think it's an excellent film. It's extremely well written. It was co-written by Anthony Hickox and John Burgess. I couldn't find any other credits for this John Burgess. There's another guy who worked on Star Wars, but he's the recent Star Wars, but he's too young, so I don't.
Not the same guy.
I haven't found, yeah, it's not the same guy, so I haven't found anything else that he did. But it's a shame because he manages to weave all these characters and plots together, and I think it works really well. It's a lot of fun. I've seen it many times. I always enjoy it.
It's a
When
rewatch.
was this made? When was this made?
1990.
What did you say?
Okay. Yeah, I asked him
1990.
when it was made.
What it was named?
When it was made.
Sundown of the
It's when
Vampire
it
in
was
Retreat.
made. You said 1990.
Oh, when it was made. Is
Yeah.
it the 80s?
Yeah. 1990.
Oh, 1990. Okay. There you go. All right, so what's your next selection?
The next one is Two Orphan Vampires. This is
yeah.
Jean Rollin, a French
Jean
film,
Rollin.
1995, so it's kind of late. No notes in the booklet. He thought he was dying of kidney failure when he was making it, but he actually didn't.
I remember all that.
And I also learned from Tim Lucas's notes in here that it was inspired by the same novel that was filmed by D.W. Griffith's Orphans in the Storm. It was called The Two Orphans. And the girls have the same names, Louise and Henriette, and so it's like it's based on a novel that he wrote that's apparently much longer, but it's these two girls. They're blind. Nobody knows who their parents even were. They're living in this Catholic orphanage, so there are crosses everywhere, and they're dealing with it because they are vampires. So that's the thing. Sundown. All the traditional aspects are there. They play around with them a lot, but they're all there. And the other two I'm going to talk about, they kind of pick and choose what they're going to deal with, which elements of vampire lore are going to be associated with these vampires, because these girls, they can walk around in daylight, but they just can't see. They're blind, and they see the blue world, so it's like this obvious day for night. Like I was watching Frankenstein: The True Story the other day, and you could see the obvious day for night. Now, Beast Must Die has a really obvious day for night because it's got the blue filter. But here they actually talk about the blue, so it comes across as an artistic choice and not just simply day for night. But these girls can see in the dark. They can read in the dark. They read about Mayans and Aztecs. They decide that they're Aztec goddesses. Apparently there was an Aztec bat goddess, and it's like, oh, it looks like you. It's like, no, it looks like you. And for much of the first part of the film, their dialogue is alternating. They're almost like interchangeable characters. They get along together. Again, it's not. We don't know if they're sisters. They may be sisters. They act like sisters.
Are they lovers?
Not explicitly, and it's noted in the book. They do give themselves a small peck on the lips, and they cuddle a bit, but there's nothing any more obvious than that. Well, actually, there is a part where they get naked and hold each other, but they're actually trying to see if their adoptive father will notice because they're outside. And
that doesn't sound like siblings.
But that's as far as it gets.
Okay.
And it's
what a
interesting
relief.
because
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, and it is interesting because they do seem to have partly we don't know, are they really vampires? Is this their imagination? They encounter this woman who claims to be a werewolf.
I think they're vampires.
We never see her turn into a werewolf. There's a ghoul woman later in the film. You never actually see her do anything. And there's a real, is this their imagination? Are they mentally ill? All these elements are all in there. They get adopted by this ophthalmologist who wants to cure them of their blindness, and he doesn't know they can read at night either. He eventually catches them, and at one point they go out, and they usually go after like people who seem like lowlives. They when they can't find anybody to bite, they feed on each other. And they get some brandy to treat themselves, and they start drinking the brandy when they're done with that, which is interesting because they're clearly supposed to be minors. So it's France.
Well, if they're vampires, it no longer matters.
You know, I just have a
But they talk about past lives. That like they previously died in New York City. Interestingly enough, and it was
So
actually
they remember
shot there.
past lives.
They walk around at Trinity Church, and it was shot in New York. I mean, it's very recognizable because I've been
that's
there.
wild.
Yeah, he didn't go. He had his second unit go.
Yeah, I know he did second unit in America when he was really broke doing that movie. Kaelyn, what would you say?
Yes,
Kaelyn
I
wants to say
have a question for you, Scott. And anyone else who's seen this one. I haven't yet. It's on my watch list, but so we've talked about like vampirism and capitalism and vampirism and like the bourgeoisie, vampirism and lesbianism and all of that. So I'm wondering, like, with this guy wanting to cure the twins of their blindness, like, can we maybe see like a connection between vampirism and disability here? And then that getting into like
Definitely.
the whole complicated political thing of like, is it right to, quote unquote, cure someone of their disability, or is it fine that they have that disability and they just live a little differently? Like, I'm really, really curious about that now.
Well, that is an interesting aspect, because I'll tell you, because at one point they're in a cemetery and they haven't hurt anybody yet. I mean, they have in the film. Their first victim's actually a dog who is still breathing when a guy's digging a grave for it, which
that might be a mercy killing at that point. Geez.
Yeah.
Well, that's what a lot of reluctant vampires do. They prey on animals first.
Yeah. Lucas talks about it in the book that's actually Jean Rollin who's digging the grave for the dog. And basically, is this guy crazy because the dog is still breathing? It's clearly not dead. But he just treats it as
might be a vampire.
Yeah, it might be.
I want to see vampire puppies. That sounds great.
There is Zoltan the Hound of Dracula.
Yeah.
I love that movie. I love Zoltan. That's incredible.
But so they're in the cemetery. They haven't attacked anyone yet. But there's one guy who's actually credited as Bigot with a Gun. And
I've met that guy. Many of that guy.
Yeah. We all know him.
He realizes once because they come to the cemetery at dusk, and there's a couple making out, of course, and they haven't actually hurt anyone yet, but they're running and they're swinging their cane around, and the guys immediately, they're not really blind, they're demons from hell, and they start shooting, and then that's when they actually start attacking. And this is clearly set in the present. There are cars everywhere, like. And so the reason, so later on in this film, so the guy wants the ophthalmologist wants to cure them, and they come back with a brandy, and they're just really they're tipsy. They probably haven't really had anything. Well, they're French, so they probably have, but they probably haven't been drunk before, and they end up leaving this bottle on the ground. And so he lives in this walled estate, and he comes in, he finds a bottle on the ground, and he thinks people have broken in. So he just runs out. He runs out with a gun, and he shoots into the trees where the girls are hiding. Louise gets injured, so obviously she's not immune from bullets. And then Henriette has to save Louise. She pierces herself right. It's not like obvious. He talks about how he nurses her from her breast, but it's not really her breast. It's really just around here. But she recovers because she's able to drink the blood from Henriette. But they then become convinced that the adoptive father is going to kill them. And it comes across a lot like Heavenly Creatures, which I noticed. And it mentions that Tim Lucas isn't sure that Roland saw it, but he was familiar with the case it was based on.
Yeah, they're okay. So inspired a few movies.
So they Henriette stabs him, and they run up to the roof. They set the place on fire, and they escape. And of course, it gets reported in the news and stuff. But they go back to the school and with the orphanage, and they try to prey on this girl in the infirmary, but they can't do it because she's too. She accepts that they're vampires. She's like, and she clearly doesn't want to die, and they just get too sympathetic with her, so they end up preying on some girls who are drinking and smoking.
Might as
like
well get a good
their whole
time
thing
for
is like, we can't be sympathetic to everybody, and here I'm just thinking, yeah, you don't realize why your adoptive father shot. You probably could have helped you because he probably would have assumed you were mentally ill, and he probably would have been able to find. He probably would have been able to cure your Well, he probably would have been able to treat you as someone mentally ill. He might have been able to get you some blood to actually drink without hurting anybody.
Or be able to see
That's what immediately came to mind. It's like he's going to interpret them as mentally ill. He's going to do everything he can to help them because they wouldn't be responsible
so he doesn't
for their
really
actions.
think they're vampires.
He never knows that they're vampires. They just think because that they just think
He's
because
a little slow there.
Yeah. Then he never knows, but because he shot Louise, they become terrified because they're young people. They don't really think things through. They think he knows. They think he knows, and that's why he shot at them. So that's why they kill him.
They're paranoid.
So even though you don't agree with what they're doing, they're constantly sympathetic characters. And when after they leave, because the nuns really love them, and the nuns are horrified when they realize that they've just killed these two girls, and they flee from. They don't really have any vampire powers. They other than just the drinking blood, and you do see them with fangs, whether it's real or not.
Yeah, like you said, Roland picks and chooses in each movie what vampire lore he's going to use and what he's going to reject. So, I mean, in my opinion, it's a genre-lin movie, so they're definitely vampires.
Yeah.
And
at the end of this film, well, I just wanted to say, at the end of this film, they meet this girl, and they hide out in the barn, and this girl named Natalie comes in, and she sees them, and no, her name is Nicole. I'm sorry, and she comes in, and she doesn't run for help. She mentions she's heard about them on the news. Do you need is there anything I can do to help you? And she's like, and at one point she's like, are you gonna bite me? It's like, no, you didn't run for help when you saw us. And it turns out, when her parents come out of the farmhouse, and it's the bigot with the gun and his wife, the same guy from the cemetery. And he ends up shooting them, and they end up going down in a marsh. And I kind of like to think, because there is kind of a physical similarity, I like to think they were reincarnated as the girls in The Lure 20 years later.
Possible.
If you ever seen The Lure, it's
I've
about,
just heard a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's a Polish musical. It's inspired by The Little Mermaid, but they are horrific mermaids who actually eat people. But it's still.
So in other words, it's more closely in line with the original Little Mermaid than the Disney version that we all love.
It's funny because the girl, because it was a musical, the girl actually auditioned with a song from The Little Mermaid. I assume it was part of your world, but Criterion didn't. Either it doesn't exist, either they didn't record her audition, or they just didn't pay the rights to put it on. But she actually, it was funny because she said she watched that movie every day when she came home from school, even well into middle school. But
that I would be interested in seeing that, Lord. But do you want to talk about your last movie?
Yes, the last one I'm going to talk about is Cirque du Freak, the Vampire's Assistant. It's made by Paul Weitz, who is best known for the American Pie films, which I haven't seen. It's based on a series of novels by Darren Shan, and they treated it much more comedically. Fans hated it. I wasn't familiar with them. This is the fourth one I just got from the library, because I've read the three that the film was inspired by.
Is it a good adaptation?
It's an interesting adaptation. They played around with a lot. They made it more comedic. It has a real Tim Burton-esque kind of flavor to it. It opens up with this really elaborate animated title sequence that really gives you this sort of dark. I mean, it is a YA book that they turn into a film, so it's a family-oriented film, PG-13. It starts out with the kid who's. It zooms down into the ground, shows the kid in the coffin playing video games on a cell phone. So this gives you an idea of the start of the tone of the film.
All right.
Yeah.
And then as we're introduced to the character, he's like talking about how, I never really wanted a normal life, and it shows his dad in his Argyle sweater, and he's like, college, job, family, college, job, family, and all these shots, and it shows him. It literally shows him turning into his dad, wearing the same costumes and everything. So this scene like totally pulled me into the movie. This guy, he's not really interested in having this ordinary life, and there's this. So, and they learn about he and his friend, whose name is Steve Leonard. Steve Leonard's mother's a drunk who has all these boyfriends, serially. So he really hates his life, and he's obsessed with vampires. And Darren is obsessed with spiders. And so they go to this freak show, and they have this teacher who's like, he's really it's really funny because he says like freak shows are illegal, and like, oh, they exploit these unfortunate, disgusting people. He's like really, and he's all their
so
lessons.
Compassionate.
Every time we hear we introduced to this guy, his name is Mr. Kersey, and he scratches his nails across the chalkboard.
Mr. Kersey?
It's yes.
Is he related to Paul Kersey of Death Wish? I'm sorry, go ahead.
and like every time we see him in the classroom, he's always talking about Hitler. And
where'd that come from?
That's a red flag.
That's a red
flag.
Yeah.
So Darren and Steve go to this freak show, and they're introduced to all these elaborate freaks. There's a wolf man who rips off these women's hands, and their hands grow back, and
this is all real.
It's all real. Okay. And it's funny because they get Ken Watanabe, who's in Weiss's later film Belcanto, plays Mr. Tall, who runs this thing. He's like, "Are you boys 21?" And he's like, "We don't allow anyone who's under 21." And he's like, "Say yes." So he like lets them into the theater to watch this freak show, but one of the performers comes out, Larkin Crepsley, and he's performing with a spider. So Darren is really excited by this, and Steve is really excited because he recognizes Mr. Crepsley with another name from a book about vampires that he has. And so he was this vampire that was born in 1783. And so Steve goes backstage because he wants to meet the vampire and get turned.
Okay.
Darren goes backstage because he wants to interact with the spider, which is deadly. But and Crepsley can only control the spider with a flute.
I was going to say who wrote this stuff, but you already told us.
Spider I can control with a flute. That sounds great.
Yeah, it's the author's name is actually Darren Shan, and he tells it in first person. He's written books under other names, but apparently Darren Shan is his real name.
So this is autobiographical situation.
Well, I accidentally found out that Darren gets killed at the end of the series, so I don't know.
What happens? So that he didn't publish any more books. He's dead, right?
So he has suicide.
No, he did publish more books. He's still alive. This was actually supposed to be a series of 4 movies, but unfortunately,
so the Darren character in that series dies.
Yes,
and then he keeps doing
Unfortunately, the film was a massive box office failure. It came out in 2009. They plan to make 3 sequels that are not going to be made.
Oh darn.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate because when this was over, I really wanted to see the next film, and there are a lot of changes. There are a lot of changes.
That's a good way to do a series, but you got to get money to do them.
Yeah.
Yep. There's the problem.
So, what's your verdict, Scott?
We've barely even got. I've really barely even started talking.
No, don't tell me the whole plot.
Oh yeah. We can't spend too much time on.
Yeah, give me a summation. Like what is what's the point of the movie? What do you like about it?
Well, so Darren ends up getting turned into the vampire to save his friend, but he's only a half vampire at first. And there's all the we learn about how. What?
He's like Blade.
He said like Blade.
Yeah, so first he's a half vampire who can walk around during the day, which Crepsley can't do. The book is the book says if he covers up really well, he can go out for about 4 hours without dying.
Got it.
but anyway, we find out there's a big war between two kinds of vampire. The vampire who use the methods that Crepsley uses, where they don't seriously hurt people. They instead of biting people, which will cause too much, they don't want to leave bodies around. They just take their very strong fingernails, scratch somebody. They have breath that can paralyze people, suck out a little bit, let them live. And then half the vampires decide to adopt these methods. The Vampanese are these traditionalists. They don't want to do these methods, and so there's a big conflict. It wants to, so it's going to turn into this war, and
what a petty thing to fight about.
Steve ends up being turned into a Vampanese, and I think the heart of this film is actually, I think, this character named Rebecca, who's not in the novels at all, who's this monkey girl, who's the assistant costume designer at the freak show, she has a prehensile tail that she actually uses to rescue herself at the end of the film.
So she looks kind of like a monkey?
She doesn't look like a monkey, she just has the tail, which she keeps balled up because people step on it.
That character in Doom Patrol, that character Dorothy Spinner has the face of a
she has the face of a monkey, but this girl's really cute. And so she's the love interest. Her character is developed a lot more in the deleted scenes, unfortunately, because I really like her character. But you have to watch the deleted scenes to see a lot of.
They need to edit those back in.
Yeah, the crux of the film is that Darren keeps losing his power. Darren keeps losing his strength entirely because he doesn't want to drink blood. There's a deleted scene where he tries to feed on some pigs in the back of a truck. He does eat some. He has to leave his family because he's tempted to prey on his little sister.
Why doesn't he steal blood from hospitals like a lot of other characters we've talked about and you're going to talk about?
Yeah, I don't know why he doesn't do that.
Okay, I'm just throwing that out there.
Because the reason he gets turned into the vampire is because when he steals the spider, his friend Steve messes with it. It comes out and Steve gets bitten, and in order to get, and that's Crepsley's thing. I was like, if you want me to save your good for nothing friend, you've got to become my assistant and become.
I'm going to ask you a really dumb question. When the spider bites him, does he turn into a spider?
No. No, he just passes out and gets hospitalized. I was trying to follow
the internal logic of this, but
no, he just gets the proportionate strength of a spider.
Oh, okay, yeah, like that guy in those movies.
And in this, it's like, well, can I turn into a bat? And he's like, no, that's bullshit. And in the book, he actually goes into an explanation. Do you really think someone with a massive human could turn into a bat? But he can climb like Dracula does in the novel. So he actually climbs into the hospital. He climbs into the hospital window, and they have a power called flitting, which allows them to run at super speed like the Flash. But they can't fly.
Oh God, it's that post-Twilight kind of stuff.
They don't have a lot of powers, but they are superhumanly strong. And he does the thing with the nail when he first go. He doesn't want to stay with Mr. Crepsley, so he tries to go back to his family. He goes to school. He does the thing with the nails against the chalkboard. He just rips the whole chalkboard off, and Mr. Kersey ends up being Steve's first victim, which is interesting. Because he we don't like Mr. Kersey because he discovers the freak show and he treats the freaks horribly.
Well, the good thing about this is if this movie sucks, we don't have to watch it now. You've told us everything.
I think it's a great film. It
could be. I'm just saying.
The characters in the freak show are really well developed because that's where he ends up based is in this freak show.
Okay.
And like I said, the crux of it is he doesn't want to drink the. He doesn't want to drink the blood, and Rebecca tells him, well, because he considers himself human even though he's a vampire, and this comes up in the books quite a lot. And he's like, "There's the morality, like, well, you used to be humans, why you want to prey on them?" Like, well, we don't want to prey on them. That's one of the reasons we developed these.
So what is the ultimate? What is the ultimate solution in this chapter?
Rebecca says to him, it's not what you are that makes you human, it's who you are. She offers him her blood and obviously doesn't take enough to kill her.
Okay.
he likes her. So
Right.
of course they have this cute
We're back to
kiss
the
where her
Sundown
tail
problem.
goes up and
Yeah.
everything.
Okay.
But so
Sorry.
So Steve is now associated with the Vampanese, and he's with the vampires, and it's Lee because this Crepsley ends up killing the Vampanese who turned Steve. It's going to erupt this giant war, and the end scene.
So
of
is
the
this
film
war
is really
resolved? Is this war resolved in this, or is
it's
it like
not resolved? It's not resolved in the film because they were
now?
supposed to
Just
make
tell us how it
sequels.
ends, though. Get to the end.
How it ends is Darren joins the freak show, and he's been staying with the snake boy Evra in the tent, and at the end his cot is replaced with a coffin that's installed with a sound system, and he gets
What
into
did you just say? Just what?
The coffin is installed with a sound system, so
So
he
what
can
was it
listen to
replaced?
music.
You said something was replaced by this coffin.
A cot. It was just a regular.
I thought you said his
metal
cot.
Okay.
I was like, what the hell?
So,
No, it's like
is this the movie? Is this the movie that had the 3 sequels already planned?
Yes, it
I
had
lost
all the
track.
sequels planned.
Okay,
They're like,
I would say
they're like
maybe
12 books.
we need to
and it's based
recommend
on
the
the first
books to
3.
everybody because I don't
Hold
think
on,
we're getting
keep
any
talking.
sequels on.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
we're getting
anyway,
any
so
sequels.
at the end, it starts with his voiceover, it ends with his voiceover. He pulls the coffin with the stereo system shut and accepts that he's a freak, and that's the end of the film.
Yeah, it took a lot to get to that. I mean,
Oh
I
my
figured out I was a freak
God.
when I was pretty
Okay.
young.
What a movie.
It is a fascinating. There's
Jeez.
a lot of stuff I left out. I think it's really fascinating. It wasn't as funny the second time around. The books
Okay.
are not funny at all.
Second time.
Well, it's definitely
you-
off the beaten path.
I
of the
feel
ones we're
like
talking about.
you might be the only person who's ever watched it twice.
Yeah.
I'm just
Even
a
the
Yeah, that's
guess.
director hasn't
Entire
watched it
planet.
twice. He may not have watched it once.